All right, hello, I'm Cassidy Sugimoto. I'm an associate professor in informatics, and I do research in informametrics and scholarly communication. I study social media and interdisciplinarity and collaboration. I study gender in the scientific workforce and mobility. But instead of giving you a broad overview of all the research that we've done, I decided I would jump in deep and show you some of the results I'm most excited about on a sort of quirky project that we've been doing recently. So as Foucault famously asked, what does it matter who is speaking? And it matters a lot when we're talking about scholarly communication. So the author is the center of the reward system in science. When you author something, when your name is a byline on a piece of paper, suddenly you can collect all of the rewards for that. You're productive, you are successful if you garner citations to that product. That becomes your identity as a scholar. But there's a Janus-faced nature to this. At one side, you're getting the credit, you're getting the rewards, but you also have responsibility for that scientific work. And with the growing rates of fraud in academic authorship and honorific and ghost authorship, we have to reconsider what does it mean to be an author. Now, here's a nice example of the rising rates of hyper-authorship. So this is actually the byline from a paper, and each of these are individual authors, where we have thousands of authors in high-energy physics. So about 2 months ago, we finally had the highest-ranking one with over 5,000 authors on a single thing. Now, this paper had 7 pages, right? It took 2,394 authors to write a 7-page paper in higher energy physics. So this makes you ask, well, do we still have the same notions of authorship, right? What does it mean? It obviously doesn't mean penning, right? They didn't each write one word or a comma in each of that. They worked together over distributed ways in order to produce science. But it really cuts down our notion of authorship. Should each of them get credit for that 7-page paper? Should they each get 1/2000th of a credit for that paper, right? What does authorship mean in the 21st century? So lots of people have tried to deal with this, and the medical journals have been perhaps the most proactive because fraud in medicine has some severe consequences. So the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors said, here are the things you have to be an author. You have to have done substantial contributions to conception, design, acquisition, analysis, interpretation, and you have to have written the work, and you have to have looked at the final version that's going to be published. And you have to be able to say not only what you did, but be able to identify the work that everyone else on that paper did. Now, I would hazard that if we went back and asked this guy what that guy did, and they're mostly men, I don't think that they would know what that person contributed. Frankly, they probably haven't met most of the people with whom they've co-authored, right? So it really challenges this as a standard for authorship. So PLOS and a couple of other journals have moved to this radical notion of contributorship. On a movie, for example, we don't just say all of these people were on a movie, we say what they did. This person did costume design, this one did hair and makeup, this was the director or the producer. So why don't we do that with authorship? Why don't we not say you were an author, but you were a contributor, and this is the way in which you contributed. So here are some examples from PLOS, the Public Library of Science, which is one of the biggest open access publishers, and they said, you know, we can pretty much put authorship in these 5 main categories. You did some analysis, you conceived or designed it, you contributed tools, reagents, right, other resource allocation, you performed the experiment, or you actually wrote the paper. So what we've done is we've scraped all of these papers, so a little over 87,000 papers that have more than 600,000 instances of an authorship on this paper, and we said, okay, what is the distribution then? What actually makes authorship today? And here are some of our findings. So this first one looks by discipline to see how even the distribution of work is. Did these people do all 5 of those contributions? So you see over here in physics, professional fields in mathematics, more evenness. Everyone saying, yes, I did all of those things. I analyzed, I wrote, I conceived, I contributed. And then you get down to biomedical research, health, and clinical medicine, where the large majority are only contributing to a single task. Very few people are doing all of the tasks across a paper, right? This is fragmented, distributed kinds of knowledge production. You can also look at this in the proportion of authors who contributed to any specific task. So you have this top line over here is writing the paper. So in these fields, almost everyone contributed to writing, to penning something. Over in clinical medicine, chemistry, health, other things, very few people, a smaller proportion of the people have actually contributed to writing the paper. So we have a different distribution of the kinds of tasks that are important. Now we can also look at the likelihood of doing a certain task if you're only one person. So for example in this, if you only do one thing on a paper, what you're most likely to have done is to have performed the experiment. Similarly, if we look at the kinds of activities that coalesce together, we see an isolation of contributing resources, an isolation of experimentation, but conceiving, analyzing, and writing the paper tend to go together. Now, this has severe implications when fraud is often done in the experimentation stage. So if that piece is isolated from the rest of the paper, we're opening ourselves up to a lot of scientific malpractice. There are differences in age. Younger people are more likely to do the experimentation, older people to contribute resources. And there's a difference over time. So as you age, you start doing less of the experimentation, you do more of the writing the paper. Interesting analysis stays pretty much the same. You start out your life doing analysis and you keep doing analysis throughout your career. Now we've also looked at that to say, okay, does that tell us anything about these first or last authors? Was there a lead or a lag author? And as you can see, first and last authors are more likely to be associated with everything. And first authors are more likely to have done more contributions than anyone else. First authors are really, truly the lead authors on that. We can use that as a proxy for lead authors. And I'll just in 1 minute say, this is not all created equal. So we have looked at this in terms of female contributions to the paper versus male contributions. And I'll very briefly show that both for when females are either the corresponding author, that is typically the last author, or the first author, they're more likely to have done all the tasks except contributing resources. That means men are essentially paying for their space on the authorship in a female-led paper. In a male-led paper, women are more likely to have done the experimentation. So their authorship contribution is in doing the work of the paper on a male-led paper. We see lots of these kinds of things, of course, over time. Even if you're taking seniority into account, women are still doing more experimentation relative to men. And as you increase the team size, women are still doing proportionally more experimentation, so we're not distributing labor over time. And you can see that more when you break it out by corresponding female versus male authorship. So we have women sort of as the hands of science here, but not proportionally represented in these prestigious first and last authorship positions. Lastly, a regression that takes into account age, seniority, discipline, country affiliations, and everything else you could possibly imagine shows that the odds of a woman being associated with experimentation is much higher than a man, and men are associated with all the other kinds of authorship tasks, which shows a bifurcation in the kinds of knowledge production that we have. So I'd like to thank you. If you have any questions about this or my other projects, contact me, my collaborator Vincent Lariviere from the University of Montreal. Thank you.